Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in the diaspora and in St. Lucia. Welcome once again to Moving Forward. I tell you this tonight, brothers and sisters, wherever you are, I have no intention of pulling back on the punches I intend to throw. So without further ado, I will begin first with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Oh, Father in heaven, we come to you tonight to give all the help and strength that we can give to our Prime Minister, Philip Joseph Pierre, that he will need as he presents the full thrust of his budget. It is one without a doubt that will be tailor-made for all in the country. Therefore, we will all see the truth and the light of that budget, and we will come to the realization that you have sent us, without a doubt, the deliverer for the country in terms of it moving forward to a brighter tomorrow. Oh yes, Father in heaven, we thank you and adore you because you have given us light once again, where there was total darkness all around when the last government was in power. We are without a doubt in one of your humble servants, and I'm sure that Philip will walk in the light and will always glorify you. So will all St. Lucians, because you are without a doubt the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Amen. And thanks be to God of the Most High. Amen. Tonight I quote from Proverbs 6, verses 6 to 19. Lazy people should learn a lesson from the way ants live. They have no leader, chief, or ruler, but they store up their food during the summer, getting ready for winter. How long is the lazy man going to lie around? When is he ever going to get up? I'll just take a short nap, he says. I will fold my hands and rest a while. But while he sleeps, poverty will attack him like an armed robber. Worthless, wicked people go around telling lies. They wink and make gestures to deceive you, all the while planning evil in their perverted minds, stirring up trouble everywhere because of this disaster will strike them without warning, and they will be fatally wounded. There are 7 things that the Lord hates and cannot tolerate: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that kill innocent people, a mind that thinks up wicked plans, feet that hurry off to do evil, a witness who tells one lie after another, and a man who stirs up trouble among friends. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Oh, tonight, I have so much to say, more so as the Prime Minister outlines his spending plans in the budget for on the 24th day of the month to the nation. This will be in place for the next week in what is termed the 24-25 budget. Before going on any further, let me share something I said to a very good friend and who thought that it was impressive. I said quite succinctly, in life, that communicating is essential and the language must be understood by both parties. 80% of communication is listening. Feelings, without a doubt, are fundamental whether young or old. Oh, I mentioned that my favorite subject is poetry or literature. That is why I taught literature in England at the secondary schools. Therefore, there is no doubt in my mind, communication plays a very important role in our lives. It is without a doubt vital if we are to be successful in whatever we do in life. This is the message that must go to all politicians. It is also very important for them to know on both sides of the political divide that you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the time, because by the words you use, one can detect the lie. However, if you cannot follow up with deeds, then you are heading into a lonely world because no one will accept what you say in the future. Many of those who were in the last government found that to be so because they believe in untruths. Why? Because their leader was alleged to be a horrendous liar. Therefore, much of this moving forward program will bring this to light, because it is clear that very few words that not only the leader, but also the higher echelon of the United Records of the Poor, as they are today. Well, tonight I want to tell you, my brothers and sisters, in this pristine land of ours, that there will be so many daybreaks on the horizon that have not yet dawned, but it is to come. Since Labour took power in July 2021, there's been so far much daybreak, because we began to see some light instead of the darkness that hovered over us, and would have continued to loom if we did not throw out the last government into oblivion. Yes, I say this without flinching, that in 2024, the daybreaks will have been dawn, as the government plans include innumerable projects that will come to the fore, bringing a new dawn every day, a new era in the development of our pristine land. Why? Because of the Prime Minister. He's one who cares, and he has a government determined to make St. Lucia shine again. He wants it to be the top in the Windward Islands, as it was called, and also the Eastern Caribbean. That's where we were, at the top. Therefore, tonight, I do intend to look at what has taken place in the last 7 years, but intend to do so in a philosophical and psychological sense. Let me be clear. I intend to target one or two individuals who have led this country not to the promised land, but to the fleecer's land, like those involved in the DSH project that came and pretended to be foreign direct investors and was accepted to be so by the last government. We also saw the Cabot land and the divisive dealings that took place, and some of what I mentioned last week. We also saw the shenanigan that went on with the Range Rover affair, as I call it, because it was tied somehow to CIP dealings. The now Minister of External Affairs, Alva Baptiste, made it clear in the House, as part of the opposition then, that government dealings with DSH was an alleged fleecer's dealing and not foreign direct investment. Yet the Prime Minister then, Alan Chasney, took offense to what he brought out into the public domain in the House, and he immediately stood up on a point of order because he wanted the word fleecers withdrawn from the gentleman. Well, Alva simply refused and stood firm when asked by the Speaker of the House, Andy Daniel, to do so, because in his view it was really, and only a fool would not smell rotten carcass of a dog. Before continuing, I want to point out that one of the meanings in the Collins Dictionary, pocket dictionary that is, of fleece is to defraud or overcharged. Having outlined all this, I now want to ask a few questions from the past Prime Minister and leader of the opposition, because he was the one who objected to the word in the House. First, I would like to know how much money that T.O.R. King put into the DSH project. That is, apart from buying our land at $1 an acre because we were really jackasses and morons, I want to know how much he bought another parcel of land to accommodate this DSH project. Further, I want to ask how many years was he given in owning the land. I go further to that to ask, did he compensate anyone for the meat processing factory that was built by our diplomatic friend, the Taiwanese, and the government and the country then? Why did the government then had to build a road costing $13 million to accommodate this nonsense of a race course we term DSH? Whose money paid for the horses that are now not in St. Lucia? Expensive horses too. And where are they at present? Because they were certainly not cheap. And above all, where's our CIP money? In truth and in fact, ladies and gentlemen, that we must now say quite categorically to the opposition and their representative, now the Minister of External Affairs was correct then in calling what took place a form of defrauding the people of the country, and therefore they were without a doubt involved in alleged fleecing. Was not another individual who would have been in the DSH project arrested and charged in another country and now jailed for a long time for money laundering? Yet he was bandied about for the role he would be playing in the sport of kings. Have we forgotten? I want to point out to the leader of the opposition that there is a video introducing this individual. In looking back, I applaud the now minister without a doubt. And I remind all St. Lucians, more so, members of the United Records of the Poor, what the party leadership was up to. Further to the above, I want to know how much did it cost to transport the garbage from Viewfort to Dayglow in Castries? Not only that, who was the firm involved in transporting that garbage? I go on further to that. Were any St. Lucians employed at the DSH? More so during the few rest meetings that took place? We must not forget that some of our people were supposedly young people trained, and after having been trained in the caring of horses, etc., would be employed, they were told. Yet word has it that only one or two were. At this juncture, I'd like to know, in all sincerity, how much was paid to train these local individuals who did not get a job after that training. I also want to know how much were paid to the individuals that came from abroad to look after the horses and did so much of the work that had to be done during the race meetings. Further to that, I also want to know who paid for the expensive hay and the air conditioning that these precious horses were given. Our poor would not even get that sort of treatment. Did that come out of taxpayers' monies or monies that were put in by T.O.R. King, or later he would be, we were told, compensated by the CIP monies? Would I be right to say that any CIP monies he collected would go into his account and not the consolidated fund or the government's treasury? These are all relevant questions, I hope, ladies and gentlemen. And I do hope personally that the special prosecutor will look into the shenanigans that took place, whether it was fleecing, alleged corruption, or a blunt, crooked deal. So at this juncture, I'll take my first break and I'll be back. It's a hot night. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was talking about a few questions that I had to put to the ex-Prime Minister. And these questions at this juncture are relevant because, as I've mentioned before, it is very important to get the answers to these questions, because I personally want to know if there was alleged corruption taking place under our very noses, so to speak. Another reason for bringing all this back to light is because our people are quick to forget, more so when the higher echelon of the United Records of the Poor is at present pretending that they were saints when they were in office. One final question I have to ask is simply, where are the horses now? Cortejo in Creole. Have they been sold or given away to friends in other islands, or sent back from whence they came I don't think so. If so, was a price paid for them? Because the money would have to be returned from whence it came. Oh, tonight, I don't want to pull no punches, because the now opposition want in government made a lot of promises that were never realized. For example, where is our $7.3 million for vaccines that we did not need, yet that money was funneled out? There are many distractors, and I say to those who care, wait for the comments and tears that will come, because the truth must be forever on the throne. We cannot be blatantly be that stupid that an alleged con merchant can think that we are so stupid to be conned twice, more so when our agents are out there selling their tribe. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to go back to something that Minister Stephen King had to say when Joseph, that is, he is then the minister, he is now the deputy leader of the opposition party, called for the resignation of the Prime Minister Pierre in regards to crime as the National Security Minister. He said quite categorically that he lacked no substance, and in essence have no relevance. Oh, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I also want to go back to one or two things that Minister King had to say, and which is extremely relevant to the present day debate dealing with the United Workers' Party and the United Wreckers of the Poor, which it has been transformed to under the leadership of Alan Chasney. It should, I hope, touch the hearts of the real UWP per se, and also should touch the hearts of every caring St. Lucian. In that in 2011, after the fire in 2009, but in 2011, the work that was being done under his government, that's Stephen King, continued under the Labour government led by then Prime Minister Kenny D. Anthony, and was without a doubt nearly 90% finished, even with the enlargement that took place. What was significant and was clear and concise is whether Stephen King said what he said, there was no ambiguous language that the Alan Chasney government, of which he himself was a minister of, literally stopped the project. Well, as we all know, it came under no other than Guy Joseph then. Why is another question. And the simple answer is that it is because when the work finally began, it was allegedly passed over to Fresh Start, as Minister King made quite clear now. The question that must be asked, who is Fresh Start? Because I'm pretending I don't know. And did that individual minister have any dealing with that company? He made an alleged remark that had me speechless when he said that the foundation of the hospital, that is Stephen King, that was at $3 million, was suddenly assessed at $9 million. Stephen King was deeply worried about the hospital reconstruction, to the extent he firmly believed that those involved in it, there was, to an extent, alleged corruption, and should go to jail. I didn't say it, he said it, for that project, and pointed out that Fresh Start were the main contractors. Stephen King said it in the House. This is one of the questions that the special prosecutor then should look into, and also the so-called Pajora letter. Many St. Lucians would like to know the significance of the letter and its implications if it had gone through. I believe that this is significant because it may give us an idea as to the length in plotting that was taking place. or tonight, I'm looking back on certain issues that seem to have Steve very upset. And I can understand his feelings when one looks at the hard work he had put in at the time. And the footing on what happened, from the 1997 elections, 1997, as far as the UWP was concerned. And we forget 16-1. He said quite emphatically, I find myself unable to recognize the founding principle of my party then, and therefore he could not be a part of that party now. And he continued, as he spoke, to say quite categorically, c'est pas flambeau, and repeated it several times. There was something said that was fundamental when one considers that it was Sir John who brought Alan into the party when no one else wanted him. His wife, his mother, that's Sir John's wife and mother of Jenin, said quite emphatically that they never wanted her, especially when she won her seat. The winning of the Mikunov seat then was like a passport to them. They never wanted her and had made up their minds that they would relieve themselves of her when the elections were called. On to another area, in that funds generated by this government, that is, and their recurring expenditure, 45 million is estimated, and it went up to 90 million due to the increase in demand efficacy. Alan and his poodles have the audacity to criticize the government's CIP even now. It seems that the opposition is in a muddle as to whether DSH was a CIP project. Some say yes, some say no. Alan then maintained that DSH, there you are, is not an approved CIP project and has not put in an application. However, they will. That's what he was saying. But not at this point. Pointing to the developer is funding with his own money. That's T.O.R. King, using some of his funds. This, in my view, simply does not add up or make sense. And therefore, it is a blatant lie or alleged lie to me. I therefore come to the conclusion that the special prosecutor, not Dennis Springer, must go into this fiasco with due diligence. What I want to know is how much is held by T.O.R. King in his overseas account from the sales of passport. This, from what we were told, was confidential. How can that be when it is money that the state should be aware of and have control of? This is the wheeling and dealing that was taking place under the Alan Shasnek government. And we would say alleged dealing. Therefore, another question is clear. If we were going to compensate T.O.R. King as a private investor, especially on the DSH deal, why should we be selling, in my view, prime land at $1 an acre? Who in St. Lucia and the rest of the world would have such a deal? Is this not sacrilege and alleged corruption at the highest level? These are all the areas that the special prosecutor, again, should be looking into. And not only that, at least we should now be hearing as to what areas are being looked into at this juncture by the special prosecutor. Many of us should have been aware of as to who were dealing with, that is, from past experience, when they were dealing with Alan Shasney as Minister of Tourism years before. As I've mentioned before, what then was all this idea of boxing paradise in aid of? Reason why I'm asking, we must not forget also that he, as Minister of Tourism, paid an individual called Huddle or Muddle or whatever, $100,000 as a tourism consultant. And this individual virtually gave us nothing in return. But what was worse was that as Prime Minister, he brought an individual here, paid him $33 million to show us how to plant artificial turf, which was a waste of time. What we, the experts, found out is that the so-called artificial turf under a blazing sun emits a pungent substance which can be poisonous. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Prime Minister we had. To date, one would like to know how much money was spent on that project, because without a doubt it was a flop. That I go back to Boxing in Paradise. He told the people of the country that Boxing in Paradise would turn St. Lucia into a mini Vegas. What a con trick. And there were some who believed him. Allen's tourism planning was simply piecemeal and was a complete disaster, one after the other. I know, especially on one project. Yet the United Workers' Party in time made him their leader and later the country's Prime Minister. It was from that stage, after a year or so, I began to realize more so after the Jenin Compton's fiasco that he was turning the party into the United Wreckers of the Poor. I'm bringing all this to the fore because I have come to the realization that St. Lucians on the whole likes to forget things, as I mentioned before, very quickly, when it suits them. I do intend to remind them that we are not all mendicants, jackasses, and barking dogs. And in the process, I would like to ask Allen again how we will get our $7.3 million back that he paid for vaccines that we never got, and who will be giving us the money back. At this stage, I'll go for my next break. I will be back. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And as I was saying about our $7.3 million, who is going to pay us back? I want to know if it's Alan who's going to give us the money back, or his father, or someone else, because the state is short of that money at this juncture. Think of how much that money would do in some poor and deprived part of our country. Can that be fair to those areas when that same Prime Minister then said that we were broke or did not have money? If that was not so, I would like him to tell us some of the areas in which his plans brought money into the country. How much did we pay a consultant to give advice that was a waste of time? Once again, he went overseas to get a person by the name of, as I said, Huddle before, and paid so much money to him. Fede now, as Prime Minister of Tourism, in a newscast, made the remark that they had settled the range development Black Bay project. For me, that was a fiasco, as I called it. And he made it look as though it was an amicable settlement. He went on to say that the settlement will cost the government a net gain of $21 million. Range development he espoused made $40 million from passport sales. Black Bay Hotel employment would be high, 40 acres on the 40-acre side. Changes to the CIP put investors at a disadvantage. He didn't tell us that as such. Administrative difficulties. What amazed me is that the then Prime Minister, after admitting that the deal had fallen through, made a remark that lots of other developers are literally queuing to come or are waiting. Therefore, the question is simply, who are they and where are they coming from? Because we haven't seen them. Yet, what was remarkable was that Range Development, with no airs or graces, said emphatically to our government then, pay up the money that they had invested or expect a lawsuit. Therefore, what we were bombarded with by the then government was pure lies, lies, and more lies. Many St. Lucians, I'm sure, was not aware of the amount of money it cost the country because the government then was inefficient and showed that they could not manage the affairs of the state. And therefore, instead of us making some money, we were paying out with nothing in return. How can any country of the world prosper with nincompoops like these? And now they want to come back. But further to that, they think they have a right to cast aspersions on the now Prime Minister Philip Joseph Pierre and his government, who is now putting the country back on track in paying its debts. And by the time the next election arrives, we'll have a country who will not be in deficit, but will be debt-free. Tonight I say this with a passion, that the last government had what was, I found, to be the most incompetent government that we have ever had in St. Lucia. These men and women led the country were not prudent, nor did they care about the suffering they were causing to the poorer people of the country. Basically, what I would like to point out, and I mean it in all sincerity, is to ask their leader to show me one who left the government poor or close to poverty. Also, show me one of their main poodles, an ass lickers, so to speak, who did badly. I therefore say this in all sincerity tonight, that Alan and his band of merry men and women must never, ever be in any future government of this country. We have had a dose of their governance, and therefore their gross incompetence. This last Prime Minister was just about comedy and failure. If we look at his life, one would say that what was obvious, and those who know him closely, as if they were honest, would also be of that opinion that he was simply a spendthrift and could not be trusted with the country's finances. This guy talked about growth in the country. How could that be when you did not spend the little we had wisely? If the growth was there, I would want to know, after 5 years, where did it disappear to? The individual, in my view, was brash and seemed to live only on lies. When he promised that he would create, listen to this, 1,000 to 1,500 jobs. That's in the South. Yet he never produced anything of note. Here was a Prime Minister telling the country that it was broke or that it did not have money. He talked about the development of the South and the amount of jobs he would have created. Yes, not from foreign direct investors, but from investors in St. Lucia. But the foreign direct investors would get the benefit. That was certainly, in my view, pie in the sky. This guy really thought that the DSH project would have brought jobs to St. Lucia when he knew this was a lie. Did he not talk about DSH as sports of kings. Yet he was the one, and it is recorded, that clearly said that the racehorse track will not make any money. This individual said that 12 million US dollars have been invested in the DSH project, and that T.O.R. King will be reimbursed with CIP monies. I would like him and T.O.R. King to give St. Lucia a breakdown of how the monies were spent and on what. The audacity of these individuals was to make the pronouncement that they would make Vieux Fort the pearl of the Caribbean. In what? Horse racing? Or the many little islands that T.O.R. King promised to build? You should go to Dubai right now and see what rain has done to it. If Alan and his poodles believed that nonsense from T.O.R. King, then they were more stupid than I thought. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make it clear that I have nothing against Alan or his government, only that he did not lead the country in the manner I expected and seemed to have led many people astray. I'm trying to be as honest as I can be. Alan and his government abrogated their deeper responsibilities of the people. During their period in government, for many, it was like hell on earth. St. Lucia was like a world gone mad indeed, or at least one that had lost any sense of reason and balance. Indeed, a good society is on which the public tranquility is preserved by precisely this kind of sympathetic conversation. The willingness to listen to others with sincerity was pie in the sky for these people. This was not part of their culture because they lived in a fool's paradise, and that their way to them was always the right way, and nothing else or no one else mattered. Some may call certain politicians son of Satan, and I may believe this because during those years, there was a feeling of utter helplessness. Now these same reprobates are in their false world prophesizing the impending doom and gloom scenario for Philip Joseph Pierre's government. Why? Because it bugs them to see that the country that was supposed to be broke is back on course. And without a doubt, the 2024-25 budget will show signs that everything is on course for a country that will surpass all expectations. So these prophecies of impending doom and gloom from the united wreckers of the poor, as they would see or hope to see this mayhem happening with the government, is now without a doubt wishful thinking. Looking back, when Alan was interviewed as Prime Minister in regards to St. Lucia's level of debt, more so when he was the same one who said quite categorically that we were broke, made the statement that we are not concerned at this moment on debt or debt. He said that it was well financed and within our terms of repayment. These are his words, not mine. If we were in such a position of debt, how in heaven's name that any form of continuing to borrow well within our repayment, he says, whether the terms, he said something about 5 or 10 years moratorium. This, in my view, was sheer evil talk that was being perpetrated because it showed that they did not care about the poor of the country. This is sheer sacrilege and dishonesty at the highest level, especially when a country has high debt. How in heaven's name can they improve the services they give to the poor in the country, such as health, education, helping farmers, fishers, etc.? My continued laughter anger over the last week, and without a doubt, I laughed too, to my heart's content, was while doing my research for this program. I saw a program which was done before the last election. Even now I'm laughing. This portrayed the present deputy leader of the United Records of the Poor and a few others who were on such a high before the last election, which they thought was in the bag for them. I want to share with you why they seriously thought so in their own imagination. It was when they were talking about their motorcade, which in the deputy leader's view and the others was one they had never seen before. They seemed overjoyed and excited, and therefore they were trying to convince the listening public that it was all over, more or less, for the opposition, because this motorcade was so huge that it was the biggest and largest they had ever seen in this country. They describe it as a sea of yellow, as far as the eye could see, and beyond. This was one of the propaganda before the last election. I am sure many of you would have remembered that, but because they wanted voters to think that they were going to wipe out the Labour unity government. It is clear to me that they were living in a fool's paradise, and even to the date, they are still in the make-believe world of theirs. However, I want to say to them that they will have a lot of waiting to do until they ever get a chance to run this country again. I tell them this, that if the unity government does not win all 17 seats at the next election, only a few of them may lose. I have heard some saying that they would never vote for a black man, and that is what Philip J. Pierre is, and that they would always vote for a white man, or one that was called couleur wayayay. I want to inform them that Alan is not white, and one can trace his family heritage, and to whom, and to ask who is the mother of his father. What does upset me is the warped minds that some have in this country on the subject of race. Even today, no wonder a good friend of mine and an ex-teacher spoke about the attitude of some, which gives the impression that we still have house slaves in this country. I have suffered racism at its zenith in England, and therefore I know how it feels. And that is why I decided that I wanted to be educated to the highest level possible. When you had the leader of the opposition making comments about Kenny and his stupid comments about colonization having a conscience, then to my mind, this guy cannot be the leader of a predominantly black country. Not only that, but he had the audacity to say that history and heritage of the Dr. Kenny Anthony literally gave him the massa mentality. Then went on to say that you can change your name, but you cannot change who you are. I was somewhat flabbergasted because of him saying this, because he said he was a Barnard. And Barnard was white, you know that. That Kenny is also. Poppycock, because Kenny is my cousin. Well, none of them are neither white, so to speak, he or Kenny, because some parts of them are not white per se, because no one in this wide world has a white color. We call them white, and yet when we look at the white color, they don't look like it. This was deliberately used to differentiate black, which was always there, to the color white, to suit their purpose. I said to them that living in Europe for such a long time, many of the whites in those countries would think very little of people with those ancient beliefs still in the Caribbean and would definitely see them as jackasses, mendicants, and barking dogs, as they were called by the leader of the opposition right now. And it's at this stage I'll take my next break. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was talking about color and things of that sort. And I want to say quite clearly that any man with common sense would look at the leaders of the Caribbean and would see that it is those best suited to the role that are chosen or should be chosen. And not only that, if you are useless, as the last leader of the country was, then they would be kicked out as quickly as possible to the dustbin of political history. That is the fate Alan is going through, and he's finding it hard to overcome this level of shame. I heard one individual making the remark that world leaders would prefer to deal with Alan because of his color and other false attributes that he mentioned. What shocked me is that this individual gave us the impression many years ago that he was supposed to be an intelligent man. However, now I see that when you are getting older, and not me, I don't exercise that God-given brain of yours. How stupid and senile we can become, because everything is like an illusion, and which begins to revert us back to the childlike individuals that I am seeing in the United Records of the Poor. No wonder many of our youngsters believe that after 50 or 60 that you are old, and yet some of us can buy them and sell them with our intelligence and wit. I quickly come to the point when the deputy leader of the opposition made a statement that I still find somewhat pathetic and totally unacceptable, when he remarked that Labour was crying. And he said, you have a lot more crying to do in talking about the opposition before the last election. Maybe it was because of his huge motorcade that they used alleged state money maybe to fund. Not only that, his imagination was somewhat blurred, because I repeat that he was sure that he had seen a sea of yellow as far as the eye could see. However, that was only in his imagination, or before I forget, he said that there was 6 music systems accompanying that sea of yellow. Can you imagine? Music? You judge that? That's his judgment, ladies and gentlemen. I tell you this. That's all that at the next general election, we must send a message to Alan that he's not wanted in this country as leader of the party. He should, of the opposition. He should return to the country he told us that he was a product of. What still grieves me about this individual is about the way he treated the poor and dispossessed, even during COVID-19. I hope that none of you out there forget what was then termed the Fortuna Doctrine. Have you forgotten, ladies and gentlemen, what this was about? Well, he said quite categorically, and it is recorded, that he supported that doctrine. This doctrine dealt with help that was being given to small countries like ours to cope with COVID-19 because of the poverty, etc. it caused. It brought to bear on island states like ours. It was help that should have been given to the whole country. But some used it as an election gimmick and party gimmick, and made it clear that if you did not vote for the government, then you could not expect help. Can you believe this? This was being thrown at Labour constituencies then. Can one believe such a behavior from any government of the state? How in heaven's name can we ever consider people of that stature to run the country ever again? Well, once again I say, enough is enough. And they must never return. They must, without a doubt, be thrown into the dustbin of political garbage. Before I end, there is something that I think needs to be thrashed out, and that is the number of cows we now see or begin to see on the way by Massey Mega up there. It is becoming a nuisance, and it seems as if there are more cows than ever before. At one time, something was done to stop the abuse of negligent owners allowing their cows to sometimes take over the highway. I believe that the police should do everything in their power to stop the stupidity and make owners answerable, because one day there will be a multiple accident with the loss of many lives. My other concern is that the road also, we see that now there is a speed limit going down Sandals Alcyon. The speed limit is 30 miles an hour or 50 kilometers an hour. Yet some people are going at sometimes 60 to 90 miles an hour and overtaken at high speeds. Even when lorries, these big minibuses and lorries with passengers, that cannot continue. And therefore, that cannot continue. We need more police motorcyclists on the roads. And it is essential that we now have the new technology so we could photograph these people and later charge them on those roads. The safety of all persons should be a priority, and those who abuse the right of others should, in my view, suffer the consequences. Least but not last, I want to say to the United Records of the Poor that in the CIP controversy, that it was they who dropped the price from $200,000 to $100,000, because in 2015 it was at the higher price. Alan, your government did so because we were at the bottom of the ladder then, and anything that could be done to encourage CIP individuals was done. It became a price war. I also want to point out to Alan and his Records of the Poor that the DSH program was the biggest failure ever in this country's history. I said to him to go and study economics and also what short-term and strategic planning is all about. This guy will never understand that because he's without a doubt a spendthrift, as I said before, and a member of his family is adamant that is what he is all about. In closing, I continue to ask myself, how responsible am I for the well-being of my fellow men and women? Because in many cases, we see evil being committed, and we should do something about it. But what we become irresponsible more so when politicians are basically lying. And we know it is a lie, and it is being ignored because it is a party we follow. That cannot be right. Well, I say to each and every one of you tonight, brothers and sisters, that to ignore evil is to become an accomplice to it. And therefore, I simply refuse to be part of that evil. To do so is to become a child not of God, but of darkness and the devil. However, in looking and analyzing this blatant act of deceit, all I can see is that it is still one of the tragedies of human history that the children of darkness are frequently more determined and zealous than the children of the light. I therefore say to all St. Lucians to become children of the light, and let us stay in that light. As always, I've tried to be honest, because to be honest is to confront the truth, however unpleasant and inconvenient the truth may be. I believe that we must expose and face it if we are to achieve a better quality of life for all St. Lucians, whether rich or poor, middle class or poor or very poor. We have a duty to lift the standards of all our citizens. However, I also say to St. Lucians, on the whole, that we must learn to do for ourselves without always expecting government to do it all for us. Some of us are basically lazy and have become parasitic or parasites because politicians have made us so before elections, and they keep these agents of theirs for their propaganda purposes. This must end, as we are a small island, and on this ship of state, we need all hands on deck. If not, we will head onto the rocks and sink, as we nearly did with the last government. I want you all, my brothers and sisters, to remember that. So tonight, once again, I say to you, brothers and sisters, to go in peace and serve the One Most High, but never to forget that He made us in His own image and likeness. And many of us were born black, and we should be proud of that. I'm therefore black, I say often, and I'm proud. Brothers and sisters, go in peace once again, until we meet again in the presence of the One Most High next week. Therefore, good night, and good night to you. Blessed love to you all.